Welcome back friends. Welcome to another video tutorial from Shomu's Biology. In this video lecture, we will be talking about endocrine system and it's all about hormones and what are hormones, from where they are secreted and their target regions in human body. And we'll also see the functions of all those hormones and why we require hormones in the first place. Now, this is about the overview of the hormone or endocrine system. In the next few videos, we'll be talking about all the detailed questions regarding the hormone and the process of hormonal activity. Now, hormones and all this endocrine system, if we talk about endocrine system in a whole, we can say that endocrine system continues with individual glands that produce and secrete chemical messengers. Those messengers are known as hormones. Okay. Now, those hormones travel from endocrine glands and endocrine organs to their target via bloodstream. Okay, so let's say there is an organ present in our brain from where this hormone is secreted, which are chemical messenger which provide informations to the target cell which is present, let's say, in our liver, and this hormone will migrate through the blood vessel in the middle. So, hormone is a long distance call like thing in our human body. Now, the target cells that receives the hormone, they have those hormonal receptors present on their surface of those cells who can attach with the target hormone, and that triggers some signaling response inside those tissue. Okay, so let's look at this process. The goals for our learning is to identify the well established endocrine glands in the body. We will also see what hormones those endocrine glands are secreting and what are their target organs, and we'll also talk about their functions and why we need those different varieties of hormones. Okay, and we also understand the process of how that hormone works to the target organ or target tissue. Okay, so let's begin with it. Let's first talk about the most important organs in our body which are linked to produce hormones, known as endocrinal glands or endocrine glands. Now, this is a diagram which shows you all the different types of endocrine glands that are present in our body and what kind of hormones they are secreting. For example, here you see at near to the brain, there are three different glands. Pituitary, which is known as the master gland, which is one of the most important gland which is present. There is also pineal gland and a part of the brain, hypothalamus. All these things together, they play a vital role of controlling rest of the endocrinal glands that are present in our body. And among those glands we have thyroid gland, parathyroid gland, thymus, adrenal glands, pancreas, and many more. Okay, so if you look at here from the beginning and talk about each of those glands in details, but first let's look at the position of all those glands in an overview. The thyroid gland is present near our voice box, so as the parathyroid. Parathyroid is a very smaller version and that is also present in almost kind of overlapping with the thyroid gland region. Okay, and adrenal glands are present on the top of kidney. It's kind of related or attached with the structure of the kidney there. Pancreas is present almost in equivalent position with the kidney, as well as in the front line it is linked with the stomach and duodenum of our intestine. And there are two other hormones and hormonal glands that are present, ovary and testis. Ovary is only in case of female, testis is only in case of male, which produce those hormones responsible for major and minor sexual characteristics in male as well as in women. Okay, so these are the different position of hormonal glands or endocrine glands. Now let's look at let's look at the pituitary gland, which is the most important and one of the most important endocrinal glands in our body. So if you look at pituitary gland structure, it is divided into two different lobes. Actually it's known as a glandular lobe, and another one is known as neuronal lobe. These are the two types of lobes that are divided. And these pituitary glands are secreting multiple type of hormones from two different regions. One is known as anterior side of the pituitary, another one is known as the posterior side of pituitary based on its position. Now from the anterior side of the pituitary, it produces 6 major type of hormones, 6 major types, okay, namely thyroid stimulating hormone or TSH, okay, or it's also known as thyrotropin. Then follicle stimulating hormone or FSH. Follicle stimulating hormone is also secreted, which is not provided in this picture actually. It's somewhere between these gonadotropins over there. These are known as the follicle stimulating hormone. It's also secreted. Then we have luteinizing hormone or LH, which is not kind of listed here, but this luteinizing hormone also have important role. It's also functional with the gonadotropin part as well. There is adrenocorticotropic hormone or ACTH, also secreted by the anterior part, which is also known as corticotropin, and growth hormone simply, which helps for the growth of the organism, which is also secreted by the anterior portion. And it also secretes prolactin, which helps in the process of development and secretion of milk from the mammary gland. Okay. Now the target of all these hormones are different. If you look at from the beginning, the TSH or thyroid stimulating hormone, it targets the thyroid gland. As you can see, it targets the thyroid glands, and the target glands are also shown in this picture. It targets thyroid glands and stimulate the thyroid gland to secrete thyroid hormone or TH. So the job of pituitary gland is to control and regulate secretion of other hormones. For example, we see one of such is thyroid hormone here. It also targets by secreting follicle stimulating hormone. It targets testicle or ovary in case of male and female respectively, and in this case with the help of this, the follicles in the ovaries of female, and stimulates the growth of follicle and the production of estrogen. Okay, and in males the target is testis. In that case, it stimulates the sperm cell and the production of sperm. Okay. Now the luteinizing hormone is another type of such gonadotropin, and it also targets follicle, triggers the ovulation process. So luteinizing hormone triggers the ovulation process, which is not listed in this picture though, but it helps in this ovulation process and the secretion of another hormone known as progesterone. And that same luteinizing hormone for female produces progesterone, for male produces testosterone. And you know, testosterone in male provides major sexual characteristics, and it helps in the development of major and minor sexual characteristics in human body. Now ACTH, adrenocorticotropic hormone, it targets the adrenal gland and adrenal cortex region actually of the adrenal gland, and it causes the secretion of glucocorticoids, which will be required for the stress response in our body, which we will see later. And the growth hormone targets most of the body tissues to stimulate the metabolism and also for the cell to grow and divide. Okay. And then prolactin, it targets the breast in the female. It stimulates the breast development as well as lactation. Okay. But the role of prolactin in male is not that clear, because it's definitely not the function in male. Okay. So that in a sense are the different hormones secreted by the anterior part of the pituitary, which plays mostly the controlling role of controlling different different types of pituitary glands in our body, and they help them to secrete other types of hormones in our body. Now second type of gland we are going to talk about is pineal gland. And pineal gland produces different types of hormones. Now hormones can be of 3 different types chemically. It can be of peptide, which is protein type. It can be of steroid, which is hydrophobic in most of the part, and it can also be amine type of hormones. Pineal gland produces a hormone known as melatonin, which is this amine type of hormone. And if you look at the pineal gland, it is present near the hypothalamus region in the brain, and it's a very small gland, and this in this picture is the thyroid gland. So if you see, though these glands are small, it does not mean the effect of this gland will be less in the body. Actually, the effect of thyroid, effect of this pituitary gland, as you see, it's very small, but still the effect is huge in the human body, because it's a master gland controlling so many different other glands in our body. Pineal gland produces those melatonin, which function is not very much understood, but it's thought to be like this melatonin used to function like a dark and light cycle in our body, and it helps us to fall asleep mostly. So it's kind of work like a body clock. This melatonin kind of acts like a body sleep wake clock, and the sleep wake cycle actually help our body to be prepared for sleep every single day and again wake up at a specific time. That's the important part about melatonin. Now if we go to the third type of glands, these are the thyroid glands, and the thyroid glands secrete thyroid hormone, and which has a very important function as well. Thyroid gland produces two very different hormones mainly. There are two types of cells actually in the thyroid glands, which are follicular cells of the thyroid gland. They produce amine based, we talked about the type of chemical factor of the hormone, amine based hormone, that is known as thyroid hormone, secreted by follicular cells, remember. And there are also parafollicular cells. They produced a hormone known as calcitonin. So if you look at this is the thyroid gland, which is also present, we saw earlier the location of the thyroid gland, it is near to the voice box. Now thyroid gland starts secreting this thyroid hormone or calcitonin depending upon the signal they receive from the pituitary, which we saw earlier, in the form of thyroid stimulating hormone. Once thyroid stimulating hormone provides this signal to the thyroid gland, they start secreting different T3, T4 and other types of thyroid hormones. Along with that, they also produce calcitonin. Okay, the type of cells that they produce thyroid hormones, which are T3, T4, these are known as follicular. The cell which produces calcitonin is known as parafollicular. Now the targets and function of all these hormones, if you look, the function of this TH or thyroid hormones that are T3, T4, they actually regulate mainly metabolic processes in our body. They are very essential for the normal growth of our body. They are essential for the development of nervous system and the functionality of the nervous system in adults. Okay, and they also amplifies the effect of sympathetic nervous system in our body. While calcitonin helps regulate the blood calcium concentration or calcium ion concentration in the blood by inhibiting the osteoclast activity. Osteoclast activity helps to remove all those, like removal of calcium ions from our bone and put it into the blood, or again vice versa. So it prevents the excessive resorption of the bone by maintaining a healthy calcium ion level in the blood circulation or in the blood. Okay. Now the another type of a gland that we are going to talk about is parathyroid gland, and the hormone secreted by parathyroid gland is known as parathyroid hormone. Parathyroid gland is located inside, actually in the thyroid gland itself. If you look at the thyroid gland structure, these yellow things are the parathyroid gland. So you can see these are very tiny compared to the actual structure of thyroid gland, and this is the position of the thyroid gland near the voice box that we talked earlier. But parathyroid is very tiny glands, multiples of 2, so it's 4 different parathyroid components that are present here in this thyroid gland location. Now these are a cluster of small glands, and these are found in the posterior of the thyroid. This is not the anterior of the thyroid. this is the posterior. If you look, this is the back view. So you turn it 180 degree, then it will be placed here. So this is the front view, but this is the back view, and you will see that because the cluster of these glands are present in the back side of the thyroid gland only, and they start secreting hormone known as parathyroid hormone, which are peptide type of hormone or protein type of hormone. Okay, and this parathyroid hormone secretion is stimulated by a drop in the blood calcium level. So there is, if somehow there is a drop in the blood calcium level, that triggers those parathyroid glands to release parathyroid hormone, and this parathyroid hormone targets multiple tissues listed here. It can target kidney, bone or gut. In kidney, this parathyroid hormone causes direct reabsorption of calcium. In bone, it causes the reabsorption or resorption of the bone, and in gut, it stimulates the conversion of vitamin D into calcitrol. So vitamin D can be reabsorbed in the intestine, so it takes the vitamin D there in the intestine and helps it to convert into calcitrol, and this calcitrol will regulate the absorption of calcium by the intestines. So it actually manages and balances the amount of calcium in the bloodstream as well as in the different organ of our body, so that our body can have the calcium whenever it requires. It does not deplete it. So if you look at here, the bone releases calcium with the effect of parathyroid, so resorption, so it starts releasing calcium if it's required there. It suggests kidney to return those calcium, and it also convert vitamin D3 to produce actually to calcitrol, vitamin D into calcitrol, which is vitamin D3. It's known to reabsorb more and more calcium there. That's what the function of parathyroid hormone is. Now, other type of gland that is present near the kidney, we talked earlier, is known as adrenal gland. And this adrenal gland, if you look at the structure, these are the two kidneys, and the adrenal glands are kind of attached on top of the kidney structures, and they have kind of a similar in the anatomical structure like the kidney, because they also have the cortex and medulla and different regions. Now if you look at here, these are small paired glands, so it's kind of a hat over the kidney. It's composed of outer epithelial cortex, which are the outermost layer. This is the cortex region, and the inner neuronal medulla region. In this cortex or outermost region, if you look, this cortex secretes three classes of steroid hormones. Okay, so the hormones they secrete are steroid type. So if you look at this cortex area, this is the whole cortex area that we are looking at. Now the steroid hormones, and actually in the cortex area, if you look at clearly, in the zones of cortex, you will see three different zones of the cortex. One is zona glomerulosa, which secretes mineralocorticoids. Mineralocorticoids involved with aldosterone and corticosterone. These are the type of hormones that they secrete. The second one, zona fasciculata. The zona fasciculata, if you look, it starts secreting glucocorticoids and androgens together. Glucocorticoids and androgens. And these glucocorticoids controls cortisol and cortisone. And in androgens, it stimulates androgens. We will see the function of these things later, but let's say the third one, that is zona reticularis. It's a innermost layer of the cortex, and the zonal reticularis secretes glucocorticoid and androgens as well. Okay, so if you look at glucocorticoids, these are secreted mostly by this zona reticularis and zona fasciculata, while the zona glomerulosa is the only one which secretes the mineralocorticoids. Rest of the region secretes glucocorticoids and androgens together. Okay, now if you look at the structures of different hormones, among the mineralocorticoids we have aldosterone and corticosterone. Aldosterone causes the reabsorption of sodium. and the secretion of potassium. So it's the addition of sodium and secretion of potassium. And the type of hormone belonging to glucocorticoids is cortisol and cortisone. Cortisol regulates metabolism. It regulates the immune system and facilitates the stress response in our body. We'll talk about stress response in much more detail in the other video. And the androgens like estrogen and testosterone that are also being developed from here, these androgens stimulates the growth of start of different hormones in the early puberty that controls the female's sex drive, okay, because it carries both estrogen and testosterone. Testosterone regulates the sex drive in male as well. Now rest of the part, it's all about cortex that we talked about. If we just go to the medulla, which is the center area, this part is known as the medulla area. There are hormones also secreted for the medulla. It secretes catecholamines and different sort of peptide hormones. Now these catecholamines that they secrete, it's known as epinephrine and norepinephrine, which actually helps in another type of stress response and also facilitate the sympathetic response of fight or flight. So fight or flight response are mediated by epinephrine and norepinephrine hormone, both of them belonging to the sympathetic system, and that are secreted from the medulla region. And they also produce some sort of peptides like somatostatin, which are required in some sort of other functions related to in some cases the inhibition of some hormone activity in our body, which we will see later. Now let's move to the next type of organ, that is pancreas. It's a different organ though, but pancreas involves not only in digestion, because pancreas secretes some chemicals that also helps in chemical digestion of the food, but except for that activity, pancreas also have an endocrinal activity. It has two types of activity, as I told you, exocrine as well as endocrine activity. The exocrine activity of pancreas invests in the digestive juice production, and that juice help us to digest different proteins and fat. While endocrinal gland, the function of endocrinal glands that are present in this pancreas, or endocrinal cells that are present in pancreas, it starts secreting some very important hormones that controls the glucose level in our body as well as little of different functions. So let's look at it. So this is a large gland, but it's a kind of mixed gland. It's not only endocrinal gland, it's an endocrine / exocrine gland. So two types of major hormones secreted by pancreas as an endocrinal gland. One is insulin, another one is glucagon. These are the two hormones secreted. Okay. Insulin lowers down the level of blood glucose by uptake of the glucose by all the other cells, and it also converts that glucose into glycogen and store that in the liver. Okay, and it also helps in triglyceride synthesis by the adipose tissue of our body. These are the function of the insulin hormones there. And insulin hormone is secreted by beta cells of islets of Langerhans. Actually, islets of Langerhans is a tissue island there present. If you look at the structures in details, you'll see these are the exocrinal glands. So don't need to worry about that now. But these are the endocrinal glands, and where we have different islets. Islets means is a cluster of gland cells which produces different types of endocrinal hormones. Now there are three types of such glands in the islets are found: alpha, beta and delta. The alpha produces glucagon, the beta produces insulin, and delta secretes somatostatin, which helps in the carbohydrate metabolism and inhibits other two hormones which are both insulin and glucagon. Okay, so here the insulin regulates the blood glucose level, convert it into glycogen and store. It also synthesizes triglyceride in the adipose cell. It helps in the synthesis process, and both is secreted by these beta cells, while glucagon is secreted by the alpha cells. And the function of glucagon is the breakdown of glycogen by the liver and synthesis of glucose from glycogen. So it produces glucose and restores the amount of glucose in the bloodstream. It also produces ketones. Okay, so glucose concentration is raised by the glucagon hormone in the blood. Insulin decrease the concentration of glucose in the blood. Now they should act oppositely. When we have enough amount of glucose present in our body to function, we don't want much glucose to be roaming around our bloodstream, so they need to convert it into glycogen. So we call upon insulin to do that. While we need glucose in our body and we don't have glucose, we are starved. In that condition, glycogen needs to break down, glucagon needs to break down glycogen and to produce glucose and shift the concentration of glucose back into the bloodstream. While the third type of cells, delta cells, produce somatostatin, which inhibits the activity of both insulin as well as glucagon hormone, and it also regulates the process of carbohydrate metabolism a little bit. Now let's look at the ovary gland and the hormones secreted by the ovary gland. Ovary gland is only present in female, right, and it produces steroid kind of hormones. It's known as sex hormones because it is estrogen and progesterone. These are the two types of hormones produced by the ovaries, estrogen and progesterone. Okay, and they also produced another hormone known as inhibin, which is peptide type of hormone, but major hormones are estrogen and progesterone, which are steroid kind. Now estrogen is very important. As you see here, it secretes hormones, and actually the secretion of hormones from the ovaries are released and controlled by the follicle stimulating hormone or FSH coming from the pituitary gland. Once this gland receives it, it starts producing estrogen and progesterone as well as inhibin. They have different functionality. So now let's look at the functions of all these hormones. Estrogen is important for the egg development, okay, for the process of egg development. Okay, and also this egg development takes place inside the follicle, so it also helps in the process of maturation of ovarian follicle and their balance of producing eggs. While progesterone is important after the ovulation process only, and progesterone only secretes after the ovulation and maintains the integrity of the uterine lining, and it also acts very well during the pregnancy to prepare the body for pregnancy and also keep maintaining the environment so that after the implantation of the egg it can grow and develop into a proper embryo. While the last one, or inhibin, if you look, inhibin regulates the secretion of follicle stimulating hormone, and this is secreted, follicle stimulating hormone, you know it's secreted by the anterior pituitary gland, but inhibin actually regulates the secretion of FSH. So inhibit can actually inhibit this release of follicle stimulating hormone, and by doing so it blocks the release of FSH, so as it blocks the production of estrogen and progesterone when it's not required. Okay, and the presence of estrogen and progesterone is very important because based on the concentration of progesterone and estrogen, the female body is modified for different types of changes that is required during the pregnancy. Now if you go to the testis, which is another type of gland, and testis, the hormone secreted here is also known as sex hormone of male, and these hormones also are steroid type of hormone, okay, steroid hormones, and in this case they produce the hormone testosterone. It's listed, testosterone hormone is secreted, and along with that they also produce inhibin, just like the other. Inhibin is a peptide hormone that is also secreted by the testis. This testosterone aids the development of gametes, that is the production and maturation of sperm cells in male. It also provided the secondary sexual characteristics, and it also controls the libido. And the other one, inhibin, actually inhibit the release of follicle stimulating hormone from the anterior pituitary. Okay, just the function of inhibin is the same both in the male body as well as female body. Okay, it blocks by a negative feedback to stop the release of follicle stimulating hormone that prevents the further production of testosterone and blocks the spermatogenesis, while testosterone produces sperms and helps in the process of spermatogenesis. Now, if we talk about the different endocrine tissues and their linked functionalities in our body, it starts with hypothalamus. You know, endocrinal tissues are composed of group of endocrinal cells that are found in glands that are not specially endocrinal glands, but also they are combined together, and once they combine together we have some functionality. And those endocrine tissues are found in regions like hypothalamus, which is a part of the brain. It is found in heart, stomach, small intestine, and also in kidneys. So let's look at those endocrine tissues where the group of endocrinal cells are found together. Okay, so if we look at here first in the hypothalamus, hypothalamus has clusters of neurons that secrete different types of neurohormones into the circulation of our blood. Okay, and if you look at here, there are different regions in the hypothalamus region. Actually, it's known as the paraventricular and supratopic nuclei that is a part of this hypothalamus. Now, both of this paraventricular region and paraventricular and supraoptic nuclei secretes hormones into the posterior pituitary, and they actually release and controls the release of the hormones from pituitary. So we know, till now we know that pituitary is sitting as a master gland. It starts secreting all those stimulating hormones that acts in the different target cells and target organs of our body. But now we know there are also even boss of the pituitary, and that boss is hypothalamus, as hypothalamus secretes other type of factors and hormones that acts on pituitary and stimulates pituitary to release all those stimulating hormones. So hypothalamus is even more important here in controlling the release of hormones compared to the pituitary. Now, if we look, the hormones that this hypothalamus secretes to release, and different factors that secretes to release. Hypothalamus can control release of things like, either it can help in turning on the release of pituitary. Actually, it controls the release from anterior pituitary, and we also talked about the 6 different hormones secreting from anterior pituitary. It also sometimes blocks the synthesis of hormones from anterior pituitary, because if it does not secrete those stimulators, pituitary will not be able to secrete any of the hormones. So hypothalamus produces different sort of release hormones. For example, growth hormones release hormone, or GHRH. This growth hormone release hormone acts on pituitary, and it tells pituitary to release growth hormone. For example, thyroid release hormone. So thyroid stimulating factor release hormone, if it releases and it acts on the pituitary, then only pituitary produce thyroid stimulating hormone. Okay, so corticotrophin release hormone, if you look, this hormone release and act on the pituitary, then only pituitary produce ACTH. So that's the second round of regulation, and among them, these are the hormones that they control the secretion of. Except for that, hypothalamus is also linked with controlling some sort of posterior pituitary hormones as well. And the posterior pituitary hormones, there are 2 major types, oxytocin and antidiuretic hormone, or ADH. These are the 2 types of hormones secreted by posterior pituitary gland. Oxytocin is a peptide hormone that stimulates the contractions of the uterus during the labor, and it also promotes the milk ejection by the mammary gland. That's the function of oxytocin. It's very much a targeted function. While antidiuretic hormone, or ADH, causes the kidney to reabsorb water, and that also have some effect on blood pressure. So release of ADH also controls the blood pressure in our in our body, as well as its help in the retention of water in our body. Okay, so now if we look, all those releasing hormones we talked about, the thyrotropin release hormone, TRH, helps the release of TSH from the pituitary. The growth hormone release hormone responsible for release of GH from the pituitary. Somatostatin is released, it is required for inhibiting the secretion of growth hormone by the pituitary. Okay. Gonadotropin release hormone GnRH, gonadotropin release hormone, regulates and influences the pituitary to produce FSH and LH hormone. Okay. And DA is the dopamine. Dopamine is a type of factor that converts the prolactin that inhibit all those prolactin inhibiting hormone. Actually, prolactin synthesis is controlled by too many different hormones, but here this dopamine converts into the prolactin inhibiting hormone, and it prevents the production of prolactin or the secretion of prolactin. And the corticotropic release hormone CRH, it blocks the release of ACTH. It influences the release of ACTH from the pituitary gland. Okay. Now, rest of the tissue, if we talk about, are not that vital like the hypothalamus, because hypothalamus regulates the release of hormones and factors that even influences the pituitary gland to either release a hormone or to inhibit the synthesis of a hormone. Rest of them, like digestive hormones secreted from the heart, stomach and different regions, gut, kidneys and stuff, those are also required. Those are also required for other types of functionality. If you look at here, for example, heart is a specialized cell, and they also involved with some sort of hormone known as atrial natriuretic hormones, or ANP. This ANP causes the kidney to secrete excess amount of sodium and therefore regulate the blood pressure and the blood volume in our body. So that's a kind of simple effect by the ANP which is secreted by the tissues of the heart. Now, if you look at the digestive hormones and hormones secreted by stomach as well as the hormones secreted by the small intestine. If you look at the hormones that are secreted by stomach, the cell lining in the stomach, it secretes a peptide hormone known as Gasstream. We already talked about the hormones related to digestive tract in our digestive system videos. I'll recommend you to watch that. Now, the thing is, this Gasstream helps in multiple processes. The Gasstream travels via the bloodstream back to the stomach, where it stimulates the release of HCl. Okay, and it also stimulates the growth of the stomach cell lining. But this HCl helps, the secretion of HCl helps to make the environment of the stomach acidic, and that acidic environment helps the activity of some other enzymes known as pepsin. Okay. Now, other one, like the hormones that are secreted by the small intestine, we have different examples and different names for that. Cholecystokinin or CCK is one of the examples. Secretin, it also have GIP or glucose dependent insulinotropic peptide, which is not shown here. Let me write GIP, and motilin or MOT, that's also another type of hormones that are required, which is also not listed there. Now, here this cholecystokinin or CCK, it stimulates the secretion of bile or bile salts from the gallbladder, and the release of those bile salts that help in the emulsification of the fat. Except for those bile salt activity, we cannot degrade fat, or we cannot absorb fat in our body. We cannot digest fat very well in our body. Now, the other one is secretin. Secretin causes the gallbladder and pancreas to secrete bicarbonate ion, and this bicarbonate ion released in the stomach, it neutralizes the acidic environment in the stomach. And this is very important because the activity of the secretin near this duodenum helps in neutralizing the acid, otherwise the duodenal lining of the cells can damage. Then glucose dependent insulinotropic peptide or GIP causes the pancreas to secrete insulin. It stimulates the pancreas to secrete insulin to regulate uptake of glucose from the bloodstream. And finally, the motilin that we talked about, it released about every 90 minutes and caused the smooth peristaltic waves to keep continuing, so that whatever food we eat, that can easily travel through our small intestine into the large intestine. Okay, and it mostly sweep the food towards the terminal of the small intestine. These are the functions of all those hormones that we talked about. We talked about these 4 hormones in the middle that acts here in the duodenum mostly. There are also other hormones, if you look at here, that GLP-1, GLP-2, which are released in the large intestine. We are not interested to talk about that much, but these are the hormones are more important in the regulation of digestive system in our body. That's why we talked about it. Both the hormones secreted by stomach as well as the small intestine, namely the duodenum region of the small intestine. And finally, if we talk about the kidneys and the hormones secreted by kidneys, we can tell kidneys produce erythropoietin. The kidney tissue is not exactly entirely the kidney. You know, the adrenal gland present near the kidney produces different hormones, important hormones, but kidney tissues sometimes produce erythropoietin that stimulates the red blood bone marrow to produce new RBCs in our body. That's help in erythropoiesis. Erythrocytes are the red blood cells, and poiesis means the development of erythrocytes. So it helps in the production of RBCs. And kidney tissue also produce calcitrol, and we know this calcitrol, we already saw the function of calcitrol. The active form of vitamin D is formed with the help of this calcitrol. In response to the parathyroid hormone, they convert the D into D3, which is acting as a calcitrol. It helps in the reabsorption of calcium in the intestine. So as a summary, if we talk about, we have reviewed the major endocrine glands and the location of those glands. We also see different endocrinal tissues of our body. We've learned about the different hormones secreted by those relative glands and the relative tissues of our body. And we also saw the functionality of those all different hormones and their target organs of our body. So that in a sense is the overview of the endocrinal system. Hope you like this video. If you like this video, please hit the like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe to my channel to get more videos like that. Thank you.